And greetings. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Thank you for joining us. We are brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They have a flavor for every freedom-loving American. If you want to sign up with them today, get 10% off when you go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DEACE. You'll get some outstanding coffee, number one, but then you'll be getting it from people who share your values, number two. Firstcup.com, use the promo code DEACE. If you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription. Just go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DEACE. Also, want to remind you, you have to check this out. This is prescient as well now. The latest Blaze original special here, and this one from our friend and colleague, Sarah Gonzalez, looking at exposing voter fraud. In fact, that's what it's called. Voter Fraud Exposed, How Elections Can Be Stolen. And if you see this special, you're going to see that a good deal of time of the work that Sarah and the Blaze TV crew did on this was spent on my former home state of Michigan. All right, so we've got some news about that here in a moment I want to talk about. But go to blazeoriginals.com/Deace. You need to see this. If you go with the code VOTERFRAUD there, you'll get $30 off your annual subscription to Blaze TV. Biggest discount we can offer. All right, $30 off your annual subscription to Blaze TV if you go to blazeoriginals.com/Deace. From dead voters to voter ID laws to George Soros-funded secretaries of state to Michigan, just deciding we can just terraform and make up election law as we go. All of it's in there. blazeoriginals.com/Deace. Use the code VOTERFRAUD to get $30 off your annual subscription so you do not miss that. Now, there is some news. It's not in Aaron's montage. Okay, because this broke pretty late this morning. But a judge in Michigan, when I heard the initial ruling, I was really excited because my initial thought, well, this would be monumental. There's a little bit more to it now, but a judge in Michigan has ruled that essentially the guidelines that Michigan Secretary of State put out there that just allowed you to decide whatever you wanted to be a vote is a vote, and no one could say differently. It's unconstitutional, obviously. Just everyone's shocked when someone that is a judge agrees with such things these days. Well, this judge did. Now, I listened to a little bit more, and so hat tip to Jenna Ellis, former Trump administration attorney, who's with the American Family Association's radio network. I listened to an interview she did this morning with Cleta Mitchell, who's a really well-respected GOP election attorney. I do not know Cleta, never met her, but everybody I know that knows her speaks very highly of her. So I've come across her name numerous times in my travels politically. And she said there is an important distinction here that would go a long way to cleaning up at least some of the chicanery that you now must be able to. Again, this is stuff you saying it out loud. I can't believe like we needed to make this had to be done. Like it wasn't an automatic, but you have to do a chain of custody to show and proof of identity for a mail-in ballot now in Michigan. Which of course means if a judge says that it's illegal to not do that, it means that you were doing what before, guys? What were you doing before? That. You were doing that before. Okay. All right. So the good guys did win on that, but the bad guys won on some other things that likely is going, as Cleta pointed out in this interview today over at AFR, it's likely, especially with the stacked deck of judges that they have now in the state of Michigan, it's likely going to lead to the state Supreme Court there just overruling this judge completely and saying, same as it ever was, and enjoy your zany hijinks come November the 5th. So, someone tweeted at me yesterday, and my heart just sunk when I read it because it's true. You can always count on Steve Deace to find a cloud in every silver lining. And here's the thing, man. I'm not wired this way. I'm the guy whose favorite scene in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, one of the greatest films of all time, by the way, is when Kirk talks about breaking into Starfleet Academy to reprogram the Kobayashi Maru. I don't believe in the no-win scenario, to quote Captain Kirk. I don't. Again, if you know me at all on a personal level, you know I will find a way to declare a victory in every single situation. I am not wired to just, lay down. That's not what I'm wired to do. Okay. So I want the record to state, you'll see if you follow me on X, now formerly known as Twitter, when I saw this initial ruling, my heart leapt. I'm like, this is huge news. And then I did some more research on the ruling, and I'm like, okay. It's still somewhat good news for now. Probably won't be good news by the time it actually counts. And here I am again, finding a cloud and a silver lining. I hate being that guy. I do, man. I brought Daniel on weekly to do that. I don't want to do that, okay? But I'm a truth guy, man. I'm just relaying to you what I think is true. Doesn't mean I'm always right, but unfortunately, the truth too often these days is not hope-filled. I guess we'll just leave it at that. Gentlemen, your quick thoughts on that before we move on to the rest of the show.
Here's what I'm not lying here. I'm not exaggerating at all. I was either going to put this story in the montage or the story that I ended up putting in the montage of Merrick Garland being criminally referred to his own Department of Justice for contempt of Congress. I just flipped a coin. Which worthless, pointless story should I put in? It fell on heads. I went with Merrick Garland. I was going to put...
That's as good of ombudsman as you're going to get these days, folks. I just flipped a coin.
Show votes in Washington again. That's what it was. I saw this. I reviewed this story this morning. I'm like, oh, it's good news for now. It's probably not going anywhere. Good news. I mean, is it good news? Merrick Garland was referred to his own department for criminal contempt. It's not going anywhere.
Todd?
I'd like to sum up your frustration with something the prophet Butthead once said.
I am Cornholio. I need TP for my butthole. That?
Words.
Yes.
This is... Even if you get things right these days, this is your catechism, whatever you are. Faith without works is dead. This should mean, hey, we ride at dawn. We have this verdict. Let's clean this up. It never does, though, because everybody's got other stuff to do. I mean, that great Seinfeld scene when he's arguing with the person who took his rent-a-car. They took his reservation, but then they explain when he gets there that we couldn't hold it. And he says, it's not so much, he's trying to explain to him, it's not.
That's why it's called a reservation.
It's not so much the taking, it's the holding. And she goes, I understand, sir. And he goes, I don't think you do. I don't
think the word reservation means what you think it means, yes.
That ruling should mean.
Yeah.
What you said it was.
Yeah, and that's
but it's not.
And I hate myself that I allowed myself to feel a sense of optimism again. Shame on me, and I'll try to let that idol go for the future.
But it's not really a ruling, and it's not really this judge's fault. I mean, really, the people are the problem. We don't. But how many people know about this ruling? How many people care about this ruling?
Well, the biggest problem they have up there right now is that Democrats just put an initiative on the ballot in 2022 saying they could do all of this. And they put it in the Constitution. And they lied and told people, they literally ran ads and lied and told people up there that it was going to bolster voter ID and election integrity. So the people voted for it and put it in the Constitution. Now, I would like to say that the Democrats lied and these people are victims, but they couldn't do any of their own research. You know what I'm saying? They're that mind numbed. The people are the problem. The people are the problem. Which is why we're doing something different for Theology Thursday this week as we head into chapter 2 of Romans. So it took us about 10 weeks, right?
That seems
to
right.
Get to the first chapter of Romans. Okay.
It's the week before, yeah. So at least 9 weeks.
At least 9 weeks.
And 9 weeks of that was half of it plus your responses. Honestly, because we did the other half in 1 week.
Yeah. So we loved how we did last week, where we were just riffing on that, what a Romans 1 judgment was, and we just got together at the end of the show last week and decided, you know what, as much as possible from now on, as we go through Romans here, we're going to make Theology Thursday the full second hour moving forward. And then we'll have 3 non-political questions just be the overtime each Thursday. There may be stories breaking where we've got to get a guest on, right away in order to highlight something. But more times than not, for Theology Thursday, we're going to start that this week. As we start chapter 2 of Romans, we're going to make that conversation the entire second hour on Thursdays from this time forward. All right, so we look forward to that. So that is coming up a little bit later on the show. Also, I mentioned the overtime. Joel Berry from Babylon Bee is going to join us because he wants to talk lesbians in space. space. When we were growing up, it was Muppets in space, right? Good times. It was Muppets in space.
It's a great movie.
Now it's lesbians in space. Indeed.
For real.
Not even a joke. When we were kids, it was Muppets in space, and now it's,
One of my
now
favorite
it's lesbians in space.
quotes of all time is from Muppets in Space, where one of the big bad characters tells his Muppet secretary or receptionist, "Get the remote," and the receptionist says, "The goat? The remote." Oh, I thought you said the goat. That's quoted all the time at McIntyre reunions.
Nice. All right, but let's get it started, as we always do. Delayed, nevertheless, undeterred. Here's Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by SCOTUS says kill away. The Supreme Court today unanimously preserved access to a baby-killing medication that was used in nearly 2/3 of all baby murders in the U.S. last year. The justices ruled that the abortion opponents who brought this case lacked the legal right to sue over the Federal Food and Drug Administration's approval of the medication mifepristone and the FDA's subsequent actions to ease access to it. Yesterday, the U.S. House of Representatives voted to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt and refer him to his own Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. Garland has thus far refused to hand over audio recordings of Special Counsel Robert Hur's interview of Joe Biden surrounding his mishandling of classified documents case. Donald Trump allegedly told House Republicans he's expanding the 2024 electoral battleground map to include New Mexico, New Jersey, Minnesota, and Virginia. The Southern Baptist Convention passed a resolution this week opposing the use of IVF technology, that's in vitro fertilization technology, to the regular destruction of human embryos in the process. The SBC this week also failed in a resolution to bar women from serving as pastors within that denomination. And now here's this. A panel of Democrat-appointed judges has sided with a Massachusetts school that censored a middle school student for wearing a T-shirt that asserted a basic biological fact regarding gender. In the 2022-23 school year, Liam Morrison was a 7th grade student attending Nichols Middle School in Middlesboro, Massachusetts. It's about 40 miles south of Boston. For years, the young Morrison had worn a variety of politically themed shirts to class. However, in March of 2023, he wore a T-shirt that read, quote, "There are only two genders," which apparently triggered several school officials who claimed the shirt targeted a protected class of students. After Liam refused to remove the shirt, the school called his father to pick him up from school. Several weeks later, he wore the T-shirt to school again, though this time he covered up the portion of the message that said "only two" with a message that read "censored" instead. He was once again ordered to remove the shirt, and he complied, but Liam and his parents didn't take the school's decision lying down. They soon partnered with Massachusetts Family Institute and Alliance Defending Freedom, which then filed a federal lawsuit on Liam's behalf, arguing that Middlesboro Public Schools had violated his First Amendment rights. The district court then sided with the school, ruling that students who identify differently have a right to attend school without being confronted by messages attacking their identities. It also determined that the censored version of the T-shirt might still cause a disruption or otherwise threaten the safety of other students. Liam, his parents, and his legal team then took the case to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit in Boston. Earlier this week, a 3-judge panel ruled to uphold the lower court's ruling. Massachusetts Democrats, your thoughts?
Cheers to a bright, clean energy future for Massachusetts.
Cheers to lowering energy costs. Cheers to great new clean energy jobs for Massachusetts workers.
Cheers to investing in America.
And finally, Sir David Attenborough narrates Joe Biden's Juneteenth celebrations.
Here in the swamps of Washington, D.C., Beyoncé has decided to throw a Juneteenth party on the White House lawn, and she busted her senile great-uncle out of the old folks' home for the evening. In a perplexing turn of events, Steve Urkel has crashed the party in an attempt to give President Potato Head some racial street cred. Let's observe from a safe distance as Uncle Chester desperately tries to perform a little cultural appropriation. But alas, this hair-sniffing creeper simply cannot keep up with Lizzo and George Jefferson's moves. As the party rages on, Robert De Niro appears on the scene to dance awkwardly beside the White House diversity hire. Careful observation will reveal the sheer genius of America's second-in-command. If you stare long enough, you can see all 67 IQ points written on Kamala's face. As we observe this bizarre scene, one cannot help but wonder, how did we get here? Is this some kind of twisted prank, or are these really the leaders of the free world? But at least Joe didn't have any accidents today.
And that's what happened while we were away.
Who put that together?
I don't know.
There were parts of it that I was going to sincerely laugh at quite a bit. And then I had to stop myself because I realized it's real life and it's kind of frightening.
And it's going to win again.
I hate you, Orson. I do. Damn it. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. If after watching that last video and realizing that almost all the people that you just were subjected to are given the current power to determine whether you can get health care you want when you need it, you can get medicines you want when you need it, whether you have to take something that's a toxin that you don't want when you don't need it. I mean, I can't come up with a better argument for Jace Medical than what you just saw in Aaron's montage. So get the Jace case right now. You cannot get complete immunity from the public health corruption, but you can get some protection. And you can do that by making sure that you've got a backup of all of your available prescriptions, or just start with the basic Jace case, where they get some of the most proven, effective, celebrated antibiotics in human history are a part of that. And nowadays you can expand it to a repertoire of medications way beyond that, customize it to include probably a lot of the medications that you or your loved ones need. Just go to jacemedical.com. This can include even, simple add-ons like, for example, EpiPens or, for example, ivermectin. All right. JaceMedical.com is where you want to go. JASE for JaceMedical.com. JASE. Use the code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order. Code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order at JaceMedical.com. So, we haven't discussed this topic in a while, but I think we'll bring it back up again in light of what you're seeing occur in Massachusetts there. And, the whole topic, we spent a good deal of time. Was it last year or the year before debating this, living in blue states? Or you're just wasting your vote, your citizenship there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you have to understand that these two worldviews cannot coexist. Steve, you've said this before, like including yesterday. Apparently, I've not said it enough. So I'm just going to say it as many times as it needs to be said. Until a critical mass of our own people understand this. Like there's an interview going around right now with who's the, at least let me look this up before I say it, but I'm pretty confident that she is. So I want to make sure I get this right. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, cool. So there's this interview going around right now. Sage Steele, who basically got disbarred at ESPN for wrongthink, and she's kind of out on her own right now doing some interviews. And she's got an interview going on right now with Jillian Michaels. Have you guys seen this? You know who Jillian Michaels is?
Yeah.
The Biggest Loser chick. She was kind of she was the breakout fitness guru star of The Biggest Loser.
Yeah, okay? I haven't seen the interview, but I know who she is.
Yeah, she's been married to another woman since July of 2022. Okay. Jillian Michaels has been. And so in this interview that Jillian Michaels is doing with Sage Steele, she goes on and on about how they had to leave California, how crazy it had become, and that the last straw was if a grown man, she's describing grooming essentially, if a grown man comes up to her, they have children together, Okay. And they're not of that age yet. But if a grown man came up to, her son and he was as young as 14 and essentially started grooming him into a pederasty same-sex relationship, that would not be illegal in California. And she's like, I would just shoot that guy if he did that to my kid. Okay. And I mean, she says a lot of the things that we would say about this. Mm-hmm. Okay. But she married fashion designer Deshana Marie Minuto, married in July of 2022. She sat down last October 17th with Health Magazine to discuss her life after the show, how she stays fit now, and her identity as a queer woman. End quote. This morning, I had a conservative woman on Twitter, according to her bio, has tens of thousands of followers on Twitter, proceed to scold me that I had brought up the president of Italy had well into her 40s now, a child out of wedlock. I'm like, are we actually arguing here that the ideal is for the president of a nation in her 40s to have a child out of wedlock? Or what? That's the right-wing position now? That's the right-wing position.
Gloria Steinem's position in the 70s
yes.
is the right-wing position?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Her counter to me was, well, she was with the guy for a long time in a committed relationship. Those are, what tense of the English language would that be? That would be called the past tense, which would indicate that they are no longer what?
Together.
So what you just told me is she hooked up with a guy that she wasn't married to. They essentially just cohabitated for an extended period of time, never got married, never made it official, and now their kid the kid they had together is in a broken home. That's the ideal now. That's the right-wing position now. That's the right-wing position here. I wasn't a virgin on my wedding night. I wasn't anything close. My wife wasn't a virgin on her wedding night. Neither was she anything close. One of the reasons we were nowhere close to being virgins is because we had long ago hooked up before we were married, and we were living together in sin. So this isn't about holier than thou. This is about what's the ideal process that we should aim for what's best for children and families. If you look at statistics, the odds that Amy and I were still going to be married, doing things the way we did it, without the spiritual conversion we had, extremely low. The odds that our children were going to end up in a broken home, extremely high. Even with our own spiritual conversion, we still almost couldn't keep our marriage together. But by God's grace, we have. Now we'll finish the race together, and hopefully we're setting a good example for our children. So this isn't about the Tao of Steve or some moral preening or there's no coming back. My faith starts with a man who was dead and proved he was God because he's now alive. In Christianity, there's always a comeback. The comeback is always possible. There's always a possible comeback. But first, though, before there's a comeback, you need to know what it is you have to come back from. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
There would be no comeback if you thought you were in no need of a comeback. If I'm in no need of a comeback, what would I need to come back from? If you know what, just sleeping around, shacking up, having kids out of wedlock, and leaving them with broken homes is totes cool, then I don't need a comeback. I'm good. You see what I mean? I need nothing. I figured this whole thing out. I've got the whole world in my hands.
It's amazing how providential this is considering what we're about to talk about. Romans chapter 2.
Yes. But This is not a good thing, folks. My mom had me at 15, as many of you know. Do you know how many kids born to 15-year-old moms end up to become any form of successful entrepreneur, let alone husband and father, that by God's grace I have been? What do you think the odds are, Todd? Kid born out of what do you think his odds are? Whether it's 1974 or 2024, kid born out of wedlock to a 15-year-old mom, kid born into a two-parent home where they love each other and stay together the entire time. Which kid do you think is more likely going to turn out to be a well-adjusted adult?
It's the latter. It's just the science.
Yes, it literally is just the science. Literally, it is. Now, what does this have to do with this Massachusetts case? Everything. Absolutely everything. Because we're accepting the premise of the Massachusetts case. The only reason that the Massachusetts courts have not correctly ruled against this family is if there is a God, there are laws of nature and nature's God. They have been revealed to mankind. They were recognized by the generations that founded this country, and even they didn't get it right. They not as many of them own slaves as you're being taught. You're being taught literally every white person owned slaves. Most white people were poor, couldn't afford them. But too many white people own slaves, right?
Yes.
Because one would be too many, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So they couldn't even generationally in their era, they couldn't even live up to their own standards. Ben Franklin made his wife raise another woman's baby that he impregnated her with. Thomas Jefferson probably had sexual relations with his slave, Sally Hemings. The difference was, everywhere on every street corner they went, no one was saying, that's great, do more. Hey, because you're a sinner, let's just promote it to everybody and unravel all of society while we were at it. It was Benjamin Franklin who said, of all the religious teachings in the world I've ever studied, there is no moral code superior than to the teachings of Jesus Christ. So Ben Franklin, sinner, right? Yeah. But there's also some humility there too, right?
Sure.
Recognition that God is God and I am not. Who's the guy who also stands up at the Constitutional Convention and says, you know what, we're doing all this arguing and fighting here? Here's what we all need to do and stop and do right now. We need to stop, collectively get on our knees and pray, or we're doomed. Who was it that said that?
Him.
Same guy. So again, it's not about being morally perfect. Who's morally perfect? Raise your hand. I'll wait. Exactly. It's about what is the collective standard, however, we're going to try to build a society around. And none of us is going to hit it perfectly. But we at least have to aim for it. The reality is, all California did is took Jillian Michaels' own premise she lives her own life by. They're actually more consistent than she is. They took Jillian Michaels' own identity and worldview, and they just took it to its most damnable conclusion. That's all they did. She's the one out of step with her own belief system. Wait. I thought we were just going to go halfway down the slope to Gomorrah here. I'm comfortable. I've got an acceptable amount of Gomorrah in my life. I'm a lipstick lesbian with another lipstick lesbian wife. Our kids are great. We're good here. You see what I'm saying?
Of course.
That's not going to work. They're not going to compromise their religion like we will, and already have. They're going to enforce it, in fact, and already are. Can you guess the only thing that beats a bad religion? Can you guess?
The right one?
The right one. What's the only thing that beats a bad worldview? Same thing. What's the only thing that beats a bad theology? Again. We can't just be halfway good, halfway bad, halfway depraved?
We cannot.
No.
It's still an idol.
Yeah. Only one of these worldviews will rule. Only one. Only one will be served and accommodated. Only one. Only one. Only one. Ladies and gentlemen, picture this. 1 minute you're having movie night with your family. The next, your TV shuts off. The kitchen is dark. And you realized they took Star Wars and turned it into lesbians in space. Actually, no, that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. There's another reason this could happen. All right. Not that you're doing this to yourself out of just disdain, disgust, and disappointment, but that this has actually happened to you. And then you look outside, the whole street is pitch black. You don't know when the power will be back on. But you didn't have to panic now. Why? Because you plug in to your Grid Doctor 300 from My Patriot Supply. Since 2008, My Patriot Supply has helped more than 3 million families prepare for emergencies. I used to laugh at some of this stuff. I think, guys, what are we on, like the fourth now? This could never happen here, has happened here in the last few years.
Only the fourth?
I've lost track. I just stopped counting because it was getting depressing. Okay. So now my ears perk up when this stuff comes up. All right. Power outages, these other emergencies, a failing power grid. You can protect your family with reliable power. Get the Grid Doctor 300 right now at preparewithdace.com. This solar power generator lasts longer, runs stronger than others. It's connected to 2 solar panels at once. It harnesses up to 200 watts of charging power from the sun. It charges fast too, and you can use it while it charges as well. Multiple ports means no device is left behind. This is handy. It runs fans, phones, even mini refrigerators. Take $50 off your Grid Doctor 300 at preparewithdace.com right now. Plus, it ships fast and free. And $50 off your Grid Doctor 300 right now at preparewithdace.com. That's preparewithdace.com. All right. We mentioned earlier when we were growing up, it was pigs in space. If you watched the show, it was Muppets in space. If you saw the movie, okay, and now it went from Muppets in space to lesbians in space. Joel Berry is here from the Babylon Bee. He's been talking about this recently. That's why we're now going to talk to him here on the Blaze. Good to see you, Joel. Welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Literally, Joel, what the hell has happened here? I mean, literally, what the hell has happened? When you and I were growing up, we watched Muppets in space. Now our kids are being asked to watch lesbians in space. What the hell happened?
Yeah, it's a disaster. And I go on these Star Wars rants every so often. I really am passionate about this, and people kind of my editor-in-chief, Kyle Mann, makes fun of me for this sometimes. But it is... there has been a systematic deconstruction of this myth, this modern myth that was created in Star Wars for the last 10 years. 10 years ago, I wrote this blog post kind of warning that, feminism is going to start creeping into this story, and they're going to start subverting a lot of things, and it's going to alienate their fan base. But they don't care, because they don't see Star Wars as a story that deserves to be honored. They see it as a platform to push their own agenda, and that's ultimately what we saw.
This is where I think people just, again, don't understand, because we've gone almost full REM here in the West, and we're in the corner losing our religion. All right. And so real commitment, right? Real subversion of culture. I mean, how did the Christian church survive, thrive, dominate, except for a period, a pro-Constantine period in Rome? By and large, and even post-Reformation, by and large, if you were in the Catholic country and Protestant, you were doomed. If you were the Protestant country and Catholic, you were doomed. Really, until the Pilgrims landed here at Plymouth Rock. For 1,600 years, Christianity ended up thriving and flourishing despite having almost no cultural hegemony in almost any major power source in the world for any extended period of time. How? This kind of commitment, the willingness to suffer for what you believe. The willingness to subvert and co-opt, like the Catholic missionaries of old who did it in places like Ireland and in Viking countries, subverting their traditions and retconning them as Christian holidays or commemorances, right? This is what we used to do, All right, and we
Yes.
This is how we did this without winning a single election. Countries weren't even having elections in these days, Joel, and we end up just conquering entire cultures without any political power base. No Beachhead, no Fox News, no Blaze, no Babylon Bee, no Republican Party, and that's probably why they were winning. Okay, and so how did we do this with this level of commitment that we are now seeing the spirit of the age deploy against us and using against us in our own complacency?
That's right. You're exactly right. Our complacency has allowed this to happen. The left sees how important stories are, the cultural imagination, the power of myth. They understand all of these things. They understand that Star Wars is a monomyth, just like Lord of the Rings, just like Harry Potter. J.R.R. Tolkien called the Gospels the true myth. Every myth before pointed ahead to it, and every myth that's been written since looks back upon it. And the left knows this, and so they have been very intentionally trying to destroy it, trying to deconstruct it. Their war against male heroism, masculine characters, and by extension, their war against the patriarchy is ultimately a war against God. God is the ultimate patriarch. He's not male in the sense that you and I are. Masculine pronouns, and calls him our Father for very important reasons. It's to explain to us and help us understand how we relate to our Creator, how He relates to us. It teaches us about authority, headship, submission, obedience, and we act out this relationship in our marriages. Our marriages are a picture of Christ in the church, and the left absolutely despises it. Satan absolutely despises it, and so Star Wars, it's always been very patriarchy heavy. It's always been pro, male leadership and masculine heroism, and they have to destroy that. They have to subvert it and turn it into what we saw with Acolyte season 3 just this week. What is it? Space lesbians. Which space lesbians? That can conceive children with 2 women using the Force. It's a complete subversion of what Star Wars was meant to be.
This is a key point here that I think even people who claim they understand we're in a negative world, they still make people with huge followings. Look at the money they're losing. No one's watching. Okay. And our people look at that and eat that stuff up as if the marketplace is an arena of ideas that's being neutrally contested, and that shows that we're winning. Folks, again, this is where we have to understand our own tactics are being used against us. I know we see hospitals now as like multi-acreage monstrosities that aren't paying any taxes by and large, and are billing $500 for an X-ray. And we're like, wow, man, there's a lot of money to be made there. The Christians ran hospitals for 1,500 years, the only hospitals really on this planet, and weren't really making any money on it at all. They viewed it as missional. And I mean, if we made a profit, that was great. We could pay for doctors and nurses, that was great. But it's a mission. It's a mission of mercy. They weren't necessarily having quarterly meetings. Look at their growth chart. That's what they're doing. They're not.
Yes,
Joel, I think our people didn't understand. They're not unaware that we're not going to watch this. They didn't get it.
Absolutely, they don't care.
They don't. In fact, the fact we don't, that's their form of suffering. The fact that we hate it and won't watch it, that indicates that they were on the right side of, just like we used to view suffering for us as that was an indication we were suffering in following our Savior, and He warned us this would happen to us. That's their twisted, demented version of it. They purchase these properties for the intent of doing to them exactly what you just said, retconning them, reworking them, refitting them into their worldview. And if we don't want to watch it, then they just take that as confirmation that we're on the wrong side of history, and they should continue using the levers of government to coercively impose upon us until we figure out, or just send us to camps.
Yeah, conservatives are kind of misguidedly laugh at this. Look how much money Disney's losing. I think the cost for each episode of The Acolyte is $22 million. No one's watching this show. It's horribly reviewed. And what I'm trying to get across to people, like you said, they don't care. Disney will be fine. They're willing to lose their millions on this because this is missional for them. This is about destruction for them. And they want to tell a new story. They want to take our imaginations and our kind of our soul longings for the transition transcendent, for good and evil, for our Creator, and they want to kind of drag them back down into nihilism, politics, power. One key line from episode 3 of The Acolyte, one of the witches says something like, "It's not about good and evil, it's about power and who's allowed to use it." A complete inversion of what, Star Wars has always been about good and evil. They literally replaced it with an on-the-nose, ham-fisted Marxist message about power imbalance. And again, when the dust settles, when Star Wars is nothing but a pile of ashes, they'll sit on it proudly, knowing that they destroyed something good and beautiful. That's all they're out to do here.
And just as St. Patrick was proud to drive the snakes and the occultic practices out of Ireland, just like St. Boniface was proud to cut down the Odin tree in front of the Vikings and tell them that Odin is not God. All right, and when the little spruce grew up it was shown to be growing on the inside of the Odin tree, he said that's the true tree that never loses its leaves, like Christ. See the parallel here? I think it is very important for our people to understand our own tactics now are being used against us. You mentioned Tolkien and Lewis. One of the reasons why they wrote Lord of the Rings, they wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. They have so many allegories. The ring, which represents human nature, it cannot be tamed. It cannot be turned. It has to be tossed into a fire like a refiner's fire. A lion, okay, it's always winter, but never Christmas. And a lion who rises back again on behalf, they're sacrificing himself for the people of Narnia. Where did they get these allegories from? These are intentional allegories where they were attempting to capture the myth of that was being fed by people reading too much Aleister Crowley in this era and turn it back into the light. That's now being done against us.
Yeah, and again, with Lord of the Rings, Amazon's doing it with Lord of the Rings. Netflix is doing it with Chronicles of Narnia, with Greta Gerwig rewriting Chronicles of Narnia now. It is sad and it's frustrating. I also think it's kind of an exciting time for us, though, because the field really is wide open for people who love the Lord, people who know the truth and who can recognize beauty when they see it, to write new stories. It's time for us to write new stories, to build new things, because Hollywood's dead. Disney is creatively bankrupt. No one is, the stuff that they produce doesn't resonate with anybody. And so a huge opportunity for Christians to produce art that will resonate if we can put some actual money and some actual effort behind it. And also, I think, like you said, getting intentional, like the way they are about subverting us, we need to get intentional about subverting and tearing down their sacred cows as well.
Amen. Before we let you go, I saw a post that you made a few days ago on X that I would like to just give you a minute or two here to relay to our own audience. Talking about your own experience as a soldier, being serving within cultures that were heavily balkanized to the point of implosion, okay? And that we need to be very careful and make sure we have the perspective of what we mean when we talk about just giving up on institutions and we'll figure something else out. Like we'll just expose all this rot gut and just be perpetual dissidents and just never push back because the institutions are gone and strategies only for cucks, okay, and losers, okay. You used your own experience as a soldier being in these kinds of cultures that succumb to this kind of balkanization we're now being threatened by. And I want you to share that perspective with our audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, I was Marine infantry in Fallujah, and the main thing that I came back with from my year over there was this profound sense of gratefulness for how good we have it in America. Most people don't know, they have no concept of how good we have it, and how bad it could possibly be, the way that most of the rest of the world is. It took a lot of bloodshed, and a lot of incredible, devoted, faithful, godly geniuses to build what we have here. And as we're kind of trying to figure out, how we fix what is broken here, what do we need to build in its place? I just wanted to encourage people to be very careful that, again, being a dissident is fun because it's kind of like being like Chip Gaines, like demo day. You get to smash things with a hammer. That's really fun, but you want to be careful that you don't make things worse off than they were before, because building a republic and building the prosperity that we have here is really hard. And it's so hard that only one country in the history of the world has done it, the United States. And so I think it's important to use strategy, to be humble, to be prayerful, and to be very careful about what we're doing, that we don't, make things worse.
Amen. And thank you for your service, brother, and appreciate your commentary. Thanks for coming on. We'll do it again, okay?
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And I still want to work with you guys when I grow up. That's still where I want to work when I grow up, is with the Babylon Bee. Gentlemen, your thoughts on that conversation?
Well, there's multiple angles to that last part he said, but I think a lot of people, there are some people who don't know how good they have it, but there's another section, and it might be the largest section of all. They do know how good they have it. They just don't think it requires anything of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's our biggest problem these days, because they just won't get it. Everything's on cruise control. We are at the end of history. The next generation is we're just gonna hand off the baton. No. You're too comfortable.
Going back to the Star Wars discussion, I think it's simultaneously two things. One is what Joel mentioned, which is, when we destroy, retcon, tear down, Cloward Piven, if you will, overload different intellectual properties until they burst, so we can make something new. It is missional. They're willing to lose money on things because it is missional to them. I think it's simultaneously true, and maybe this is just the other side of that coin. Maybe I'm not a distinction without a difference. This is their burnt offering. This is their sacrifice that they bring to their gods. Mm-hmm. That's what this is. Every time we see a new property, whether it's going to be Chronicles of Narnia next, whether it was Star Wars today, this is their burnt offering to their gods. That's what it is. So that's why they don't see it as losing money. They don't see things in terms of dollars and cents. They see what Joel Berry just quoted from that new Star Wars Lesbians in Space thing. There's no such thing as good or evil. There's only power in those who wield it.
Yep.
That's actually the bad guy's position in Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. Actually, Voldemort says, I think it's Voldemort who says, only power in those willing to
That's the dark side of the Force.
That's the dark side of the Force.
That's what the enemy says in the garden. God's holding out on you. He doesn't want you to, there's no good in it. He's just holding out on knowledge. That's the lie. That's the original lie. Yeah. Huh. By the way, I had a call with some filmmakers that have a movie coming out later this year. I don't want to spoil it. It sounds very promising for the whole family. I was excited to hear about it. But one of the things they told me is I think it was Netflix they talked to, who told them their movie was great, but they could only take it if they either rewrote or reshot the film so one of the kids in the film was gay or trans.
Yep.
That's a commitment to mission. And we need that. We lack that right now. We have a commitment to comfort and holding things together and watching Fox News and voting GOP, but we need a commitment to mission. And greetings. We are back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and all of you. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, which you can take advantage of. Steve at stevedeace.com is how you can email us to do so. You can also find us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, Instagram, and also TikTok. And if you listen to the podcast version and you wouldn't mind, please leave us a 5-star review if you like the show. Thanks to all of you who have. And if you also wouldn't mind doing this for us too, hit subscribe, or if you're listening via iTunes, it would be follow. And that way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your podcast feed every single time, because you don't miss us. Then you don't miss a single one. And we don't miss a single one of our paychecks. This part of the show brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. So many of our universities today are havens for indoctrination instead of critical thinking. Basically, an attempt to essentially undo our way of life. And they are at the beachhead of the spirit of the age invasion. Thankfully, there is at least still one university, however, that believes in the original founding vision of the country and its own founding vision as a university. Of course, we're talking about Hillsdale, and as stated in its founding document of 1844, Hillsdale's original mission to offer the kind of serious liberal arts, small l, liberal arts education needed to preserve the blessings of civil and religious liberty across the land remains intact in the heart of its mission that guides Hillsdale to this very day. You can learn more about it if you go to Deace for Hillsdale, F-O-R, DeaceForHillsdale.com, and there you're going to find a short video, just over a minute long. It shows how Hillsdale's work, not just on its native Michigan campus, but also its D.C. campus, and really its work all across the country, is trying to defend and preserve American liberty. So take some time today by going to DeaceForHillsdale.com to watch this video, DeaceForHillsdale.com. We continue on with our Theology Thursday study of Paul's letter to the Roman church, the book of Romans. And gentlemen, we begin with chapter 2. Anything anybody wants to say whatsoever as we move on to the second chapter of the book of Romans?
No?
No? We're good?
Yeah, I think we've set a good template to the first one. I was waiting for if anything jumped, but no, I'm good.
Okay. Well, let's begin here using the ESV version with verse 1 in chapter 2. Therefore, now we have to go back now, and therefore what? Well, therefore, now that Paul has articulated at the end of chapter 1 that we are without excuse, that the handiwork of the creation in and of itself testifies to the fact there must be a creator, okay, that when we act, even if we do so in our own flesh, when we act in accordance with his law, we are admitting that we were created in his image. We are admitting that there is some form of hard wiring within us that knows what right and wrong is. It's just we don't want to do it. So when we choose to do it, we're admitting that this is there. Otherwise, why would we need a code of right and wrong at all, right? And so therefore, we are a law unto ourselves. And that what happens when a culture suppresses the greatest truth of the cosmos, who God is, and what he demands of us, in light of that, and then what he through Christ has done for us because of that, when we suppress that particular truth and exchange it for one of many lies that can include worshiping the created, such as ourselves, self-worship, such as the natural world, when you look at the gods of nature, of the pagan occult religions of yesteryear, our own pagan occult religion today, radical environmentalism, for example. All right, when we do these kinds of things, when we suppress the knowledge of God, what he demands of us, what he has done through Christ for us, when we suppress this and replace it with many lies, then God hands us over. He no longer restrains our nature. Common grace or the natural law is removed. We are essentially unhinged. He turns this thing into a Burger King. You can have it your way then. Yes, you can have it your way. And things will become increasingly decadent, increasingly debauched, increasingly dark, because God is no longer restraining us, because we have made it very clear that our hearts are hard and this is what we want. So he gives us what we want. Which, of course, then we will respond by blaming him for not stopping us, even though he gave us exactly what we wanted, right? Just another sign of our own sinfulness, all right? And so this is a prime example of how the wrath of God is revealed in the world when you see a culture completely unhinged, right?
Yes.
So with that in mind now, and set at the end of chapter 1, Paul says, therefore, that's what we're thereforeing from, therefore, you have at least a little bit of an excuse. Is that what he says? No, I'm sorry.
He says, and another thing,
yes,
basically.
Yes, therefore, you have no excuse. Oh man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same thing. This is, as you said an hour ago, Todd, exactly what we opened the show with providentially.
Yes.
Unintentionally, but providentially. This idea that I am going to give myself over to a worldview. Now here, this is I think a key distinction here, because we were still talking about this, the Jillian Michaels conversation during the break, and it ties into this. Okay, all of us, when we are taking a stand for righteousness in a culture, or in our families, or in our marriages, or at the workplace, anywhere in this world, all of us, to some degree, are acting against our own flesh. It's unavoidable because we are all what? Sinners. So who among us has adequately tiptoed between the raindrops of human sinfulness and fallibility that we look at them and say, oh, George knows what's up, follow George. Any of us? No, only one, Christ. So we cannot avoid. If you're standing for righteousness on any level, pick a thing. Okay? Is there a piece of income you didn't report on your taxes? You have a side piece. You have a burner account and a burner phone for red light districts. Did you exasperate your children? That's sin. That's a sin. Did you bear false witness against somebody? Did you fail to forgive somebody? I mean, especially, we've talked on the show before, prior to this era, a man truly, unless he was really wealthy, a man truly had to work to see more than one woman naked in his lifetime. And when I say naked, I mean like in an alluring, sensual way. I'm not talking about changing your kids or grandkids' diapers, okay? I mean, a non-wealthy man would have had to really work to see in person, in a sensual and alluring way, a more than one naked woman in his lifetime prior to this era. Now, you have to work not to see like dozens, if not hundreds of them. And well, the problem with that is Jesus says if we even have lust in our hearts, that's adultery, right? So raise your hand in this day and age if you've never, by that standard, you have never committed adultery. Raise your hand. There's not going to be very many hands up. Okay. So we cannot avoid acting opposite of our flesh. Now, what the enemy will come to us when we do that is say, well, it's because you have this sin here and you're not perfect. You can't take a righteous stand. So sit down. You'll be exposed. You're not good enough. And we listen to it because you know what? We do have sin and we're not good enough, right? But ultimately, it's not I who lives. I'm a dead man. It's Christ who lives through me, in me, the hope of glory. So it is not hypocrisy to act against your own flesh. That's faith. It is not hypocrisy to say, I know, man, I really don't want to do this. I'm not the most moral person in the world. But what's happening in this situation is wrong, and someone's got to do something about that. That's not hypocrisy. When you act opposite of what your flesh is telling you, and on what God has revealed as righteous instead, that is faith. So you cannot, it's impossible, any of us, to stand for any form of righteousness and then not be accusing ourselves, as Paul points out here. We can't do it. But that's not what you see people like Jillian Michaels doing. There's a difference between there are things in my life I don't want people to know. None of us wants everybody to know everything about us. None of us do. There's something about ourselves or our past or our presence, what we'd love to do in the future that we are somewhat not proud of or ashamed of if we have any kind of conscience, right? Mm-hmm. That's the human condition, okay? The difference, though, is when you internalize those things to the point that you let them become part of your identity. Meaning you're not wrestling with this anymore. You're not acknowledging that it's bad anymore. You're not ashamed of it anymore. You're no longer affixing a fig leaf to cover your nakedness. You're letting the freak flag fly. That's why I read that quote from Men's Health last hour, that Jillian Michaels wants to talk about her queer life. See, she's internalized this now. It's her identity now. Once you do that, then you're at this verse right here, Romans 2, verse 1. Oh man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same thing. Beelzebub can't cast out Beelzebub. I am fine if there are people who have given themselves over to same-sex attraction and they're adults, and they agree that the children should not be picked on, cornered, mutilated. They want to sign up and join me in that fight. I'm okay with it. But I'm now, because they're with me in this fight, I'm now not going to turn around, though, and say, well, that now makes righteous your sin. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's not the way it works. Just as if there are people who secretly are concealing an adulterous affair of a member of the opposite sex. And yet they also are greatly concerned with what we're doing to children in society, and they want to fight with me. I'm not going to refuse that. Then if they even confessed it to me, I would not refuse it. But again, I'm not going to then say that's a good thing. You're good now because of your position on this particular issue. Go ahead.
This is, the woman in your mentions this morning that you mentioned at the top of the show with tens of thousands of followers. I was following that kind of back and forth a little bit. And you were calling out Giorgia Meloni of Italy for getting pregnant out of wedlock. And this woman showed up in your mentions and she said, why are you saying that's a bad thing? I got pregnant out of wedlock as well. I think maybe the subtext was when she was a teenager, something like that. And I gave my daughter or gave my baby up for adoption. Why are you holding this against her? And is it true that in that situation, given the choice between murdering your baby, or maybe you had parents around you, or the guy who knocked you up was a deadbeat, given those choices, maybe your parents were trying to pressure you, did you make the best possible choice in that situation?
Absolutely, you did.
In giving your child up? Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Was that situation good and ideal?
Does everybody want their daughter having a child out of wedlock?
No.
Is that what everybody wants?
No, it's not.
Why?
Because that's not God's design.
Because it's not the ideal, and there's consequences most of the time.
So I think that's a perfect illustration of what you're talking about. It doesn't make that situation right. Did you redeem that situation? What does redeem mean in this context? Redeem means taking something that was bad and making it the best possible outcome. That doesn't make the situation. And that was the case that she was trying to make. It was okay because that situation was okay because I did the right thing.
I redeemed myself, in other words.
Correct.
Yes. So 2 more things on this, Todd, then I'll turn it over to you. What the enemy has done in this last generation is he has taken two commandments and had, well, more than 2, but these 2 in particular are damaging. He has taken 2 commandments and institutionalized violating them as promoted by government and culture. All right, so don't commit adultery. So he's done this via the sexual revolution. Name a house in America in the last 60 years that has not been touched by the sexual revolution. You can't find one. You're probably, someone in your family probably is a kid who went to a public school whose sex ed was greatly influenced by Alfred Kinsey. Probably somebody found their dad's stash of Playboys or penthouses. You see what I'm saying? That's before we even get to the internet porn era. All right, the normalization of fornication and cohabitation. All right, and so every household in America has been touched by some vestige of the sexual revolution, has been tainted by it. It just has. The other is covetousness. Thou shalt not covet. We've done that with the welfare state. The idea that you are entitled to things that you did not work for and earn. And because because there's a perceived notion that the only reason you don't have them is there's something systemically flawed in the system, and you're therefore owed something that you didn't work for or earn. Virtually every household in America has been tainted by this. I mean, we're in Iowa. How many farmers are how much of the farming business is subsidized at this point? You see what I'm saying? All right, and name something where someone is not getting some form of graft or grift from the government. Something. You can't. Every single one of it's the old saying, treason never prospers. What's the reason? Whenever treason prospers, none will dare call it treason. As I used to say years ago, all of us have a suckling spot in the government nip. Okay, none of us can truly, completely divorce ourselves from the welfare state. So here's what happens. Because every household is tainted by the sexual revolution, now who feels like they can stand up and say, this is a bad idea? You see what I'm saying? Because my own words condemn me. And the enemy comes to you and says, you can't do that, hypocrite, you can't do that. That's not the kind of hypocrisy, by the way, that Paul is talking about here. This is a retardation of the term. This is the idea that therefore if you've ever made any mistake ever, by the way, what's another name for Satan?
Devil?
Oh, accuser. Yes. So he accuses you probably of things you've actually done, right? And God's standard is perfection, correct? We cannot be perfect, correct, right? So therefore, if the enemy comes to toddlers and says, you do not have moral standing to take this position, the enemy is actually correct, right? God's standard is perfect, and you're not perfect.
Well, the premise you're setting up is the whole reason why liberals don't judge, full
correct.
Stop against us.
Correct. Okay. So the enemy is correct, as Obi-Wan Kenobi said, from a certain point of view. The premise is what is flawed. And so why can we not successfully roll back the sexual revolution? Why can we not successfully roll back the size and scope of government? Because all of us have the sins of the welfare state, covetousness. All of us have the sins of the sexual revolution, adultery, fornication, abortion, name it. Homosexuality now, transgenderism. All of us have these stains. Every household in America does. And so everyone feels like they have no power by which they can say anything. Here's the thing that the enemy is right about. You don't have any power. He does. It's not our standard, it's his. This is also why populist movements fail. There must be something we're all accountable to. If it's just simply the will of the people, well, they've got the will of the people in California saying we think there are minor attracted persons who should be decriminalized. By what standard will we say that is wrong? It's the will of the people, right? Mm-hmm. There must be a higher will. And one that offers us grace, forgiveness, forbearance, mercy, opportunities to do things better in the future. But first, we have to admit that we need this. If I institutionalize my own sin and promote it, and then as Paul says here, I then turn, like Jillian Michaels, and judge other people who are taking my same sin just to its next it's just next block on the red light district.
And it's not theoretical anymore like it perhaps used to be. Now it's right out in the open.
Correct.
In our face.
This is what happens when you make Bruce Jenner your spokesperson for Save Women's Sports. This can't work. And that's what he's saying right here. These are people who have succumbed. No one has done more to promote and legitimize and mainstream gender dysphoria, gender madness since Iggy Stardust. And that was an act. And everyone knew it was an act. No one's done more to legitimize it than Bruce Jenner. And so when you throw him on Fox News to say, this is what's happening to, as literally, dude looks like a lady video from Aerosmith. This is wrong, what is happening to women's sports as he's dusting his eyeliner. This is what Paul is talking about. That won't work. If we do this with our children, hey, I need you to respect your mom. Hey, Pops. I've heard the way you talk to mom around the house. What are you talking about? When they're 6, they won't say that. When they're 16, they will. It doesn't work. There has to be a standard higher than ourselves. Todd, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's fantastic. If I may apply that directly to the sense of historicity we are talking about, we have, again, Romans 1, introducing ourselves, Christ is King, those dumb pagans. So remember, this letter is roughly in 64. Mm-hmm. And this is a part Jewish, part God-fearing ex-pagan community coming together, sorting this all out. But the Jews hearing this and all of a sudden having this pivot, this is what's important, because you have these Jews very much thinking at this time that this is a roughly 1,800-year story culminating in the long-awaited Messiah. So they're thinking, and not without a psychological level of emotional understanding, we are at the end of history. Mm-hmm. And this sudden turn after Romans 1 and bringing it on them is really important to say, oh, no. This isn't an end. This is a beginning. There is very much you must be born again to this. And this is crucial, because this is everything is changed by saying, no, you're just the same as the pagans in many respects. In the most important respect, being sinners, you're exactly like them. The chosen people aspect of this has got to be not forgotten, but it has to be understood in the context what it was always pointing to, that Christ is King, and you need this as bad as anybody else. I think this is really, really important that he instantly does it, and with the harsh pivot. And again, he's a brilliant writer rhetorically, like setting them up to be exposed. And you mean us too?
Yes.
Because they're going to learn, and they're going to learn this. I said 64. They're going to learn this roughly 6 years later, when the temple is finally destroyed, and then the separation of the two aspects of Judaism, Messiah, and those who don't believe it. I think there's a whole born again quality to this. Correct. Right out of the gate.
That's a great point, because really what Paul is doing here, much of Romans is frankly a further hermeneutical deep dive into what Christ teaches in the New Testament. Like Romans 13 that we talk about all the time, that's just a further hermeneutical deep dive into when Jesus says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and render unto God that which is God's. What's that mean? That's just Paul laying that out. This is much of Matthew 7 as what Paul is further adjudicating this. Much of what does it mean to be a righteous judge, to be held accountable to the same standard by which you judge others. That's much of what he is talking about here as he goes on in verse 2. We know that the judgment of God rightly falls on those who practice such things. Verse 3, do you suppose, O man, you who judge those who practice such things and yet do them yourself, that you will escape the judgment of God? Or do you presume on the riches of his kindness and forbearance and patience, not knowing that God's kindness is meant to lead you to repentance? So let's pause right there for just a second, okay? And how believers and unbelievers, how maybe this applies to both believers and unbelievers, for example. All right, so let's take something that is rampantly a problem in America today and has been my own. I'll just pick my own sin du jour of choice: pornography. All right, so rampant growing up, rampant everywhere as I was going into my 20s, rampant everywhere going into my own marriage. All right. It has, as my buddy Fred Stoker wrote the book, Every Man's Battle. This has been an ongoing fight and battle, and I've not won every round by any reasonable stretch of the imagination pretty much since I was 15 years old. And I'm going to be 51 in July. Okay. So let's say that I just decide I'm done fighting this and it's really not that bad. I'm not hurting anybody. And I go out and actually say that some pornography is good. Like if it's with consenting adults and everybody's been age checked and diseased checked, and we keep it away from kids so that kids can't access it, and it's got an age restriction on it, okay? But then I wanted to say, but this kiddie porn or the porn with the human traffic women is really bad and really immoral. See what I'm saying here? Okay. What standing would I have to make such a claim? Not the idea that there's a sanitized version of this sin that relieves my conscience of my own guilt. If I do this, I've seared my own conscience now. I'm no longer seeking after God's forgiveness or repentance. Now, on the other hand, I might go months, maybe years, where secretly I am engaging and hiding this because I can't let it go, as what the writer of Hebrews says, the sin that so easily ensnares. And there's a portion of my mind and my brain where I need that dopamine hit, and I can't let it go. Now, I'm not promoting it. I know that it's wrong. I'm even in public, I'm like, there's no way I can justify this. And I'd even be in favor of making it all illegal, because frankly, if it wasn't so readily available, it'd be a lot more difficult for me to succumb to the sin. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So there's that aspect, but that does not mean that God's going to just let me forever go on and live with that accommodation. Eventually something will occur. Your daughter will wake up in the middle of the night. Hey, Daddy, I came down because I can't sleep, and catches you online. You see what I'm saying? Eventually, something will happen. You'll be influenced by something you will see. And then you'll want your wife to do things that she's not comfortable with because your brain's been sexually rewired by what you've influenced it with. There will eventually be consequences for this, even for the believer. Now, Paul is going to write later in this letter, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ. But that's not the same as consequences. When a building is condemned, what does that mean? It's gone. No longer exists. It's removed. It's done. It's finished, right? It's erased.
Yes.
That's not going to happen to the believer. But will there be consequences? All right. So if I'm a landlord, but just because my building's not condemned, but I have not taken the proper care of it, will there be other consequences for those actions?
Yes.
Fines, tenants I can't find tenants. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I might even get arrested and have to serve jail because what I'm doing is maybe a black mold environmentalist hazard that's spreading to other people. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
The consequences will remain. The condemnation's gone. My building will not be condemned, but the idea that I can just run it into the ground and there will be no consequences, those aren't the same things. Do not, as a believer here, when Paul is talking to you, do not conflate consequences and condemnation. They're separate things. The consequences will remain. What we hide in the dark, and we all do, what we don't want to admit to, and we all have it, what we all wrestle with, and we're like, I'm never going to get over this. I'm never going to stop swearing. I'm never going to stop being mean to my kids. I'm never going to stop drinking. I'm never going to stop looking at porn. I'm never going to stop, not giving my wife the time she deserves. I'm never going to stop giving my husband sex, and treating him like he's a fool. I can never stop doing this. There will eventually be consequences for those actions for the believer. Don't conflate that with condemnation. Are you guys with me so far?
Yeah, there's also two more words I think we conflate quite a bit, and I don't want to get into that next.
Let's do that as soon as we return. And let's talk about what these words mean for the unbeliever too in a moment. So we decided for Father's Day this weekend, my son-in-law, Steven, it's his first Father's Day as a daddy. So we're letting him pick. We're going to make this weekend, and wouldn't you know, he picks the one thing that's going to require this father to have to actually do all the cooking for everybody. Right? So much for the dude code. All right. But I'm happy to do it, So, but he's like, let's grill some steaks. Okay. So I told you we tried the burgers from Backyard Butchers. We have yet to try the steaks. We're going to try those this weekend. But I am very confident after how good the burgers held up that these are going to do the trick as well. So we're going to be grilling those this weekend.
Steven. Well played.
Yeah. I don't think he intended to pick the one thing that was going to cause me to have to cook, but Yeah. That's not the only thing I cook, by the way, but it's the one thing kind of the wife is like, I don't even want to try that, so. She's like, I would have done it. It's Father's Day. I'm like, no. I'm happy to serve. Kind of. I'm just kidding. I love doing it. It's not a big deal to me at all. And I'm looking forward to trying these steaks from Backyard Butchers. They deliver American-raised and harvested meat from right here in our American backyard to dinner tables across the country, grass-fed, grain-finished. The burgers taste amazing. I can't wait to try the steaks this weekend and see if I'm going to join. There are over 500,000 happy customers across the country leaving so many 5-star reviews online. You can save 20% right now off your first entire order. If you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off and free shipping as well. If you go to backyardbutchers.com/Deace, that's backyardbutchers.com/Deace, 20% off your entire first order. And if you subscribe, you get an additional 10% off and free shipping at backyardbutchers.com/Deace. All right, Aaron, let me go immediately right to you on what you wanted to say, following up on the points we were making here on the first few verses of Romans 2.
Yeah, just a few comments I think maybe tie what where this conversation has gone altogether. And in verse 1 of chapter 2, therefore you are inexcusable, O man, along the lines of what Todd was saying, the O man there, as R.C. Sproul writes, it's not just a generic catch-all for mankind. The O man there, you are inexcusable, O man, that's actually specifically referring to the Jews in that audience. However, the principles, these words are specifically addressed to Jews. There's more universal applications of the text. Verse 2, I believe, and I think Sproul is communicating here to some extent. Verse 2 is basically an inescapable reality for all of humankind. But we know that the judgment of God is according to truth against those who practice such things. This is, and it will be, the basis for all human ethic. And Sproul goes through the writings of the great German philosopher, or well-known German philosopher Immanuel Kant in these writings. And even Immanuel Kant, even though he described himself as agnostic, he came to the belief that you have to be, he came to the belief of theism. You have to believe in a God in order to have any functioning society. Kant argued that if our ethics are going to be meaningful and society is going to be possible, we must affirm the existence of God. Now, why is that? How can we have ethics in any functional or meaningful way without a perfect God? We can't. That's the conclusion that Kant came to, is that we can't. So what are the two words? And I think that's definitely germane to this conversation. What are the two words that I previewed at the end of last segment that are often conflated? Ethics and morality. You brought the example of whether it's Benjamin Franklin, whether it's Thomas Jefferson. By any account, both of those men had impeccable ethics. Impeccable ethics. Was their morality impeccable? No. So what is the difference? And it's two things that we often conflate. Ethics are our, what? Stated beliefs. Mm-hmm. Morality are our beliefs in action. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That has everything to do with this conversation. We often conflate these two things. And there are some deeper things that we could talk about here, but we'll kind of leave it, or kind of wrap up my comments with this. We often say that our ethics are how we act, morality is how we think. No, it's the other way around. The conversation that we had earlier, and that you talked about, I brought up earlier as well. When we try to rewrite ethics to fall in line with our morality, rewrite what our stated beliefs are to fall in line with how we have acted, we often and always go down the path of chaos. And that's what you perfectly articulated. With the woman again, I don't want to pick on her too much, who said, why are you picking on Giorgia Meloni in Italy? Why are you picking on her? I had a child out of wedlock. I give it up for adoption. She is rewriting ethics to fit her actions.
She thinks she can redeem herself.
And in doing so, she is actually completely undoing or undefining everything that she says she believes or says that she stands for.
Right.
So I think that's totally germane to this conversation. That verse 2, the first part of verse, it is just verse 2, which is, we know the judgment of God is according to the truth against those who practice such things. You're basically saying when you're undefining ethics or when you're rewriting ethics to fit your morality, you are God. That's never going to work. It's always going to result in chaos. And that's, I think, part of the message that Paul is communicating here.
And that goes back, Todd, to the point you made earlier. For a Jewish audience to hear, you have to be born again. Okay. Paul will write to the church in Corinth that the gospel is foolishness to Greeks. Okay. The idea that there's not some sophisticated system that must be learned and followed and knowledge that must be sought and acquired. Hey, God sent his son. They called him Jesus. He came to die, heal, and forgive. Okay, you see, like I'm just quoting a gospel song. That's it. That's the story, guys. Yeah. Okay, that's the whole story. And he rose again, and if we believe in him, then he'll give us a new life, and we'll rise again from the dead too and live forever. That's it. That there's not. This isn't a multi-level marketing scheme. The consequences of this require volumes of works to work themselves out, right? But the heart of the message is Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. Is really the heart of the whole message. To the sophistication of the Greeks, that's foolishness. It cannot be that simple. Why does Paul, in that same verse in the letter to the church in Corinth, call it a stumbling block to his fellow Jews? Because of what you just said.
Yes, that's exactly.
You mean
right.
we're not the best? We're not special? No.
We're not finished here? No, we're just getting started.
That's right. Yeah, you're not the pinnacle of this. You're the path to this, but he's the pinnacle, not you. It doesn't matter, as they say in John, we were discipled by Moses. Moses is dead. Jesus is not. It doesn't matter.
And Jesus can raise followers from these rocks.
Correct.
That's back in the devil's face.
So in God's economy, no, you are not more valuable than these uncircumcised pagans. Jesus died for them too. And you must be born again too. As he says to Nicodemus in John 3, you are Israel's teacher and you do not know these things. That's why it's a stumbling block. What do you mean I'm not good enough on my own? No, you're not. No, you're not. But that is an excellent segue to our friends over at Voice of Judah, because they are on the ground right now in Israel as we speak, trying to bring the gospel to the Holy Land. And there's a unique opportunity, because I know a lot of you that listen to this show that have a eschatology or theology that doesn't necessarily put a high premium on this iteration of Israel as having prophetic significance. And one of the things you'll look at how decadent the culture is and everything else. If you feel that way, you should want to support this ministry, because the irony is that the further the modern nation of Israel departs away from its actual Jewish heritage, and the more secular it becomes, actually the irony is that the greater the opportunity for ministry is. And they're meeting that need. Especially, this is on the median age, one of the youngest populations in the whole world. So let's take advantage of it. They use all kinds of humanitarian outreach, which obviously the nation of Israel needs at this particular point in time. But they use this as well to demonstrate the gospel and then to preach the gospel as well. If you want to support this outstanding ministry, seize this moment of opportunity in the Holy Land to empower the Jewish people to bring the gospel to its birthplace. You can rise up with Voice of Judah Israel right now. Visit their website, VOJ for Voice of Judah, VOJisrael.org/Steve. That's VOJisrael.org/Steve. Again, that's VOJisrael.org/Steve. Now, what does this mean for the unbeliever? Let's go to verse 5. But because of your hard and impenitent heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath, when God's righteous judgment will be revealed. What does that mean? What does Spurgeon and Mr. Hahn say about that?
Well, it's not not just unbeliever. I mean, before that, do you hold his priceless kindness, forbearance? That's somebody with a level of forbearance and patience and low esteem, unaware of the kindness of God would lead you to
thank you.
repent.
I forgot verse 4. Thank you. That ties in. My bad. Yeah,
that's
my
everything
bad.
because the answer, especially for today's modern church,
yes.
That is the modern church today.
Yeah.
Way too comfortable, way too nice. And it said, look, Lord, I did these things in your name. And he will say, I hardly knew you. That's what this is about, right?
Thank you. I forgot verse 4 there. My bad.
Yeah, Paul, this is, I thought, I circled this pretty prominently. Paul's rhetorical question in that verse, do you despise the riches of his goodness, forbearance, and long suffering? It's a rhetorical question. He's asking, do you take the goodness of God lightly, cheaply? Do you take it for granted? Do you assume that because he is God, he will not, or do you assume because God is good, he will not judge? That's the most pervasive religious myth in our culture today. God is viewed as a cosmic bellhop at our beck and call. Yep. He's a celestial Santa Claus. All we have to do is come and ask him for what we want, and he'll provide it for us.
Nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
What good is a judge who doesn't judge rightly?
Correct.
And punish evil.
If you could summarize, I've mentioned this before, you can basically summarize Luther's preamble or introduction to his 95 Theses with the line, all of the Christian life is a life of repentance. The guy who writes these words, Paul, he will write in another letter, I die daily. I daily need to be reminded. The guy who writes most of the New Testament, I daily need to be reminded of my own sinful plight. We were in our small group last night just having a broad conversation about some of this, and we were noting how many people who were awash in obvious sin, Samson, David, etc., just all throughout the scriptures, that God works through. David, frankly, if you look at his track record, I know, man, we name a lot of our kids after him. He's really a terrible father on many occasions and really not that good of a king. And like his last dying act is to hand a kill list to his son Solomon and say, hey, wipe these guys out. And yet, about him, the scriptures say he was a man after God's own heart. How? How do we reconcile these things? Because as depraved as David behaved at times, what does happen, though, is David remains humble. Now, in our culture, we think humble means I think less of myself. I'm aesthetic. I'm pietistic. Right? That's kind of what we mean. Mm-hmm. I'm the Methodist church who doesn't have any Bible verses at all. But when we get together, and have a prayer breakfast that doesn't actually have any Bible verses to it, we eat off styrofoam because we want to. We're trying to preserve the planet that can be reused. You see what I'm saying? That kind of stuff. We think that's what humble means. It's not what it means. Not in the biblical economy. It is not what it means. In fact, a lot of those things that we think are humility are actual out of arrogance. This idea that going back to faith and ethics and morality, that we confuse those things and we come up with our own metrics. And if we work and strive really hard at them, then God will be pleased. And as you say, God looks at it and says, I don't know who you are. Get out of here. Right. Humility is a recognition that God is God and we are not. And if you look at David's life, man, you see a lot of downs and a lot of opportunities for him, a lot of mistakes, terrible things. And a lot of opportunities to express humility. And you know what he does almost every single time? That. You're right, that was me. You're right, I blew that. I should not have done that. If we remain humble, it's not that God cannot overcome a humility, it's that he will not. He won't share his glory with another. He won't do it. If you are struggling in all forms of sin, but you're wrestling with it, you're that sinner who goes to the temple Christ talks about and you beat your fist against your chest, have mercy on me. God can do incredible things for you through you. But if you're the other guy that goes there and says, man, yeah, I know I've got this closet sin and that one over there and that one over there, but thank God I'm not like these wretches over here. I'm better than them. God's got nothing for you, man. Nothing. And if you for the unbeliever, that's you too. And the fact that many unbelievers think that's who the believer is just goes to show you how backwards you have it.
Yes.
Like, I can't tell you how many times in my career I've been called self-righteous. I can be a lot of things, and a lot of them bad. In my life, I've been a lot of bad things. But you know what I've never been ever on this show? Self-righteous. I can't be.
people say that what they really resent, this is an important point about false humility. They resent that you're acting and they're not, because they think humility, their definition is an excuse to be
stay
passive,
quiet. Yes.
do nothing.
Yes, I'm terrible.
The
Yes, I'm
opposite is
flawed.
true. If you
Yes.
are humble and God says march, you say, God told me what
Yes.
to do and I'm going to do it.
I cannot believe the King of the universe called me, a humble sinner, to march. Let's go. That's the real reaction. Okay, but if the show is predicated on a biblical worldview, it cannot be. Then it's not self-righteous. Now the question is when I'm basing what I'm saying on really based on the scriptures. If it's not, then it is self-righteous. But if it is, you may not like the tone, you may not like the approach, you may not even like the words in any tone or any approach. But let me tell you what they cannot possibly be. Self-righteous, because I'm not delineating a definition of righteous from myself, but from the Word of God. And this is what unbelievers do. All the ones who are holding themselves to the higher standard are they're holier than thous. And the ones that have given up having a standard, we're keeping it real. No. Your heart is hard. Your conscience is seared. You are storing up the wrath of God against you.
One of my favorite comments about this show this year is I was seeing a conversation. It was somebody was mad at you for something. Who knows? It's another day that ends in Y. And a commenter who was on our side in the GOP primary, did we even have one, said Deace is one of those Christians that tries to infuse politics with his religion. Brother, if you're a Christian and you're not infusing every area of your life with your religion, you are the hypocrite.
Correct. That's actually the hypocrisy. Correct. You either have a living faith or a dead one, and there's nothing in between. Romans 8:28.